Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses. Mr. Miller, one of the threads that you hear frequently among those who advocate global zero is this notion that somehow if we just cut our arsenal, our adversaries will follow suit. We saw this very clearly, for example, when President Obama was in Strasbourg, France in 2009, and he actually said if the United States would just cut the size of its nuclear arsenal, we could then convince the Iranians, the North Koreans to do the same. Have you seen any evidence in all of your years of work that this is an approach that would yield fruit?
No, absolutely not. In fact, under your father's strong leadership, the Department of Defense, we dramatically reduced our non-strategic nuclear forces. The Russians pledged they would do the same thing, and they maintained their forces, and now they've modernized them. We said we would move to single warhead ICBMs to be more stable. The Russians have maintained multiple warhead ICBMs and are now going back to this large, heavy ICBM, which is clearly known to be destabilizing. So I see no evidence that the Russians have bought into anything that we do in this area.
Thank you. And with respect to treaties, to INF, to New START, to some of the other treaties that we've discussed today, do you see any historic evidence of a treaty increasing American security if the United States is the only party to the treaty that is in fact adhering to the limitations in the treaty?
If the United States is the only party in a treaty, it's unilateral restraint, it's not a treaty, and that's what happened to INF. It was a treaty, the Russians moved out, leaving us in a position of unilateral restraint. The treaty was dead.
Thank you. And I know all of us on this committee share the view that we have to ensure that a nuclear war is never fought. And part of that is obviously making sure that in terms of deterrence, we also have the ability to have an effective extended deterrence. Could you talk about the impact on our ability to provide extended deterrence if we are in fact seen as failing to modernize our own strategic forces, if we're seen as failing to make the investments that are necessary with respect to our own stockpile?
I think it would break NATO. I think it could lead to the development of other nuclear weapon states inside the alliance as they want to save themselves. I think it would be a terribly destabilizing thing.
Thank you. And then on no first use, that's another thing that we hear repeatedly in terms of that's supposed to bring some sort of stability to this entire issue. Could you talk about the damage that a no first use policy would do?
I think it would have four effects. One, it would fracture NATO. This is the wrong time to get into more transatlantic angst, and it would create angst. Second, it could create a movement in some of our NATO allies to think about building their own weapons. Third, it would not change Russian and Chinese doctrine in the slightest. And fourth, I don't believe Russia or China would believe that we actually did it because they're conspiratorial, and so it wouldn't change crisis management behavior.
Thank you. And then finally, in testimony by one of the other witnesses earlier today, the ICBM force was referred to as, quote, sitting ducks that invite attack. Could you respond to that and explain to me whether or not you view that as an accurate description of our ICBM force?
The ICBM could obviously be fired if it was under attack, and enemy leadership would have no confidence that it could preempt that force. That is a powerful deterrent. Launching 400 or 800 warheads to destroy that force is an unmistakable signal that the United States is under massive attack. And therefore, again, it raises the bar to aggression and attack against us. I think the ICBM force is a critical part of the triad. The triad's a critical part of the deterrent.
Thank you very much. I had the opportunity to spend time on Friday with General Hyten at STRATCOM. I think that our strategic forces underpin absolutely everything we do. I think it would be the height of irresponsibility for us to be in a position where we decide that we're going to unilaterally disarm. We have to modernize. I think that we ought to be in a position where we are all absolutely affirming the importance of the triad. And I look forward very much to General Hyten coming to testify, and I hope that will be soon, Mr. Chairman, in front of this committee the way he has in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Thank you to our witnesses, and I yield back my time.